Hi there. We looked today in class at two-way frequency tables, and we built upon what you learned last year. Last year you constructed two-way frequency tables. Two-way frequency tables is a way to communicate the data that you have gathered, potentially from a survey of some sort. So I have an example here. We have ice cream preference versus gender, which are going to be our two variables in this particular case. Ice cream preference, they could choose between vanilla and chocolate, and then gender, obviously it's male or female. And so you took your survey and you interviewed 40 people. Well, 40 people, oops, sorry about that. 40 people is going to go down here in the total and total column, and that's called the grand total. So you interviewed 40 people, and 8 of the men said they preferred vanilla, and 9 of the men preferred chocolate. And so we're going to put 8 and 9, right? Which means if 8 prefer vanilla and 9 prefer chocolate, that means you interviewed in total 17 men, right? And you could kind of predict that in any combination, right? That you might say, I interviewed 17 men, 8 of them preferred vanilla, which means the other 9 must have preferred chocolate, right? If you interviewed 17 total. Right, but that's our male column. 8 prefer vanilla, 9 prefer chocolate, 17 total. Okay, female, say you interviewed 23 females, because we interviewed 40 total, and 17, 23 would make 40. Say we interviewed 23 females, so we'd be putting 23 here. 10 of them prefer vanilla, which means 13 of them must prefer chocolate. And so that's then my female row here. 10 prefer vanilla, 13 prefer chocolate, 23 total. And if 8 males prefer vanilla and 10 females prefer vanilla, that makes 18. 9 prefer chocolate, 13 prefer chocolate, that makes 22. And then to check that you've accounted for all of your data, both of the 18 and plus 22 and 17 plus 23 both should add to 40. And again, that's called our grand total down here. That's the total number of people we've surveyed. Okay, so all of that's from last year. What we added this year are some vocabulary words, and they're ways for us to compare data sets and to draw conclusions based off of our data, right? And so the first one, our first vocabulary word here is called joint frequency. Okay, joint frequency is an entry in the body of a table, right? I like to think of this like an elbow joint, right? An elbow joint. You hold your elbow up like this, like here's your hand. I'm a terrible artist, so pretend that's your hand, and then here's our shoulder up here coming over to our head. I don't know, right? Okay, this is a joint. That's what we're going to be looking for. We're going to be looking for an intersection, an entry inside the body of our table. Okay, I'll go ahead and ignore my picture. This is why I'm a math teacher, not an artist, okay? So we have an entry in the body of a table, like a joint. Right, and so a joint frequency, for example, we could be asked for the joint frequency of vanilla and male. Well, joint frequency of vanilla and male would be 8. Right, so this is a joint frequency, this is a joint frequency, 9 is the joint of male and chocolate. 10 is a joint frequency, right, you can see your elbow being created here. 10 is the joint frequency of female and vanilla, and 13 is a joint frequency of female and chocolate. Okay. Those are all joint frequencies, 8, 9, 10, and 13. And the other vocabulary frequency is marginal frequency, which is an entry in the margins, entry in the total rows and total columns. Okay. So in this case, we have marginal vanilla. Well, here's vanilla. Marginal on the outside would be 18. Marginal chocolate would be 22. Marginal male would be 17. Marginal female would be 23. And then again, 40 is called our grand total. We have 3 more here. Okay. The next 2 are similar. We have joint relative frequency, and the key here is this word, relative. Right? Joint frequency is just the number itself, the number that's located at the joint, right? Male and vanilla would be 8. That's a joint frequency, 8. Joint relative frequency, now we're thinking about a relative, right? Your cousin, your grandmother, your grandfather, something like that, right? There's some sort of relationship occurring, right? Some sort of interaction between you and that person, that relative. right? So there's a relationship that's occurring here, and that relationship is between the joint frequency. Remember, joint frequency is the entry in the body of a table, so the 8. It's 8, the joint frequency, divided by the grand total. Again, the grand total is down here in this corner. Right, so 40. Okay. Marginal relative frequency. Again, we see this word relative implying a relationship. Only now, instead of joint being on top, we're going to put a marginal number on top. So marginal frequency, like 18, which is the marginal of vanilla. 18, so marginal frequency divided by the grand total, which again is in that bottom corner. Okay, last one here, we have conditional relative frequency. Conditional relative frequency, again, you see relative implying that relationship, but now we have a condition at play. For our conditional relative frequency, we're still going to put the joint frequency on top, but now there's going to be a given condition. We aren't going to be dividing by the grand total. We're going to be dividing by what comes after the word given. And that's why I write it like this, because in your sentence you're going to see that word, given. And whatever comes after it, you're going to put that margin number in the denominator. You're going to be dividing by that margin number, whatever comes after the word given, literally, in my sentence. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate a couple of these with this two-way frequency table that we've got here. Okay? So your question, for example, could say, this up here, I will call it example 1. What is the joint frequency of men who prefer chocolate? Right. What is the joint frequency of men who prefer chocolate? Okay, so looking at our definitions here, okay, we have joint frequency is an entry in the body of a table. There's no relative, so we aren't doing any sort of division. We're just finding the actual joint. And in this case, it's the joint between men and chocolate. Well, here's men, here's chocolate. Joint is 9. And so that's my joint frequency. If it was joint frequency of women and vanilla, you'd find women, vanilla, joint frequency would be 10. Okay, to demonstrate marginal. What is the marginal frequency of females? Okay, well, marginal, again, marginal frequency, okay, an entry in the margins. There's no relative, so we aren't doing a fraction. Right? We're just going to do the marginal frequency itself. Marginal is the number inside the margins, on the outside of the table. In this case, it's females. Well, here's females. Margin, 23. So that's my marginal frequency there. Okay. Okay, that's joint and marginal. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of relatives here. Okay, so example 3. What is the marginal relative frequency? Right. As soon as you see that word relative, you should be thinking we're doing some sort of fraction here. What is the marginal relative frequency of males? Okay. Well, marginal relative and joint relative are both divided by the grand total. My grand total in this case is 40. And in this case we want marginal of males, and here's male, its marginal is 17. And so we're going to be doing 17 divided by 40. Okay. So when we do that, 17 divided by 40, we get 0.425. do another relative here. And then there are a ton of extra practice in the notes that we actually did. You know what? Let's do a joint. Joint relative. It's going to be the same process as what we did with the marginal relative. We're just going to use a joint number, not a marginal number. So what is the joint relative frequency of females who prefer vanilla? So you see the word relative, you should be thinking relationship. So we're going to be doing a fraction. Both of our relatives, our joint relative and marginal relative, are over our grand total. So we're going to be putting it over 40. And in this case, we have the joint frequency. So we're looking for the joint number between females and vanilla. Well, here's females, here's vanilla. Their joint is right here at 10. And so this is going to be 10 divided by 40, which if you calculate that, you're going to get 0.25. Go ahead and show that for those who need to see it. 10 divided by 40, you get 0.25. Okay, so that's marginal relative and joint relative. Again, remember, both of these, marginal relative and joint relative, you put the number, so joint or marginal, over the grand total. That's what we've done here, right? Is we took our marginal number, so in this case marginal of males, the 17, and we put it over our grand total. In this case the joint relative of females and vanilla, well, female vanilla joint is 10 over our grand total. Just realized that was not on the screen, I'm sorry. 10 over our grand total here, the 40. Okay. This brings us to our last vocabulary word, which in my opinion I've found to be potentially a little bit trickier for a lot of students, which is our conditional relative. And it's primarily because of this fact right here, that we are going to be dividing for our conditional relative frequency. We're going to be taking our joint, we're going to be divided by this given marginal condition. And what typically is a little tricky for most students is they end up using the wrong marginal number. So again, this is why I phrase it this way. What comes after the given, right? We're going to be looking for that. That's going to be my conditional. Okay. So here we go. You're on example 5. Okay, what is the conditional relative frequency of males given they prefer vanilla? Okay, so conditional, we're still going to find their joint. We have males and we have vanilla. We're still going to find their joint. That hasn't changed. Here's male, here's vanilla. Their joint is at 8. Right? But now, because this is conditional, I'm not going to be dividing by my grand total. That would be if it was joint relative frequency or marginal relative frequency. Because it's conditional, there's a condition on this. And we're going to find that condition with the given, right? The given marginal condition. In this case, what follows the word given? Vanilla. That's my marginal. That's the marginal I'm going to be dividing by. Not by males, but by vanilla, because vanilla follows given. Well, vanilla's marginal is right here. Right? I'm going to be dividing by 18. Again, we divide by what follows the word given. Okay? Which 8 divided by 15 is 0.4 repeating. Try again, let me show that. go ahead and do one more here. And we're going to practice this some more in class tomorrow. We'll practice it as we review. And there's practice problems obviously on the notes that we did in class that are uploaded to my website. And there's your homework. Okay. So example 6, we have what is the conditional relative frequency that someone prefers chocolate given they are female. Okay. So conditional. We're still going to find the joint. We have chocolate and female. Chocolate and female joint. Here's female, here's chocolate. Their joint is at 13. But again, even though it's relative, we are going to be dividing. That's what relative implies, that there's some sort of relationship there. We are going to be dividing, but we aren't dividing by the grand total because this is conditional. Because it's conditional, we're going to find our given. We have given, and what follows the word given? Female. So that's my marginal. That's what comes after the given. That's my given condition. Okay. Female. Well, female's margin is 23. And so that's what I'm going to be dividing by here. 13 divided by 3. Again, 13 because that's the joint, right? Joint between female and chocolate. And then 23 because that's what follows the word given here. 23 follows the word given, female. Female is 23, right? Always what follows the word given. Okay? And this one, when you calculate it, is 565, and it's actually a lot longer, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it there at 3 decimal places. This one does not have a nice answer particularly, so we'll go ahead and cut it at the thousandths place. Okay? And those are two-way frequency tables.